Good morning. This is Eric Guy, Chief Victory Officer at Center for Victory. Today we're going to be talking about making our weaknesses irrelevant. A lot of what we're going to be doing is talking about how to do that within the predictive index system, but there's some other stuff that I do want to share if we have time. But thanks all for joining. Again, if you are getting here even late, remember this is recorded. And you can probably about a couple hours after we're done with this should be up so that you can actually send it to other folks if you want to inside of your organizations. So we talk about making weaknesses irrelevant. One of the quotes that's really relevant to this topic is a quote from Peter Drucker. Years ago, he said, the task of leadership is to create alignment of strengths in ways that make the system's weaknesses irrelevant. As we talk about this today, we're going to talk about how to do that, how to maximize your own personal strengths and make your weaknesses irrelevant in life and business. But we're also going to talk about and spend some time on how to maximize your team's strengths and how to make those team weaknesses irrelevant as well. One of the things that we always start off talking about is this whole idea of talent optimization. And, if it weren't for people to manage, we wouldn't have many difficulties inside of our work environments. Most companies have a business strategy at the beginning of the year or sometime through the year, but we start out with one and we know what results typically that we want to acquire. Most of us in our companies, don't have an exact people strategy. So when we look at this topic today, what I want you to think about is really how do we encompass this? How do we put this into our people strategy in our company? So whether it's just me as an individual, whether it's me as a manager, whether it's our culture or our team dynamics, this needs to be part of our ongoing people strategy within our company if we're going to achieve the business results that we want to achieve. We spend a lot of time on business strategy. I think most companies don't spend a lot of time on people strategy. However, the top companies do. They spend a lot of time on their people in this box here of getting the right people in the right seat, hiring the right people. One of the big things that we'll talk about today that I've got some advice for you on is the inspire, and how do we design that within our teams. One of the things that I want to make sure we understand up front is that this doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, effort, and most of all, consistency. So keep that in mind. This is not something we just do one time. It has to happen over and over and over again. We have to keep it first and foremost front of mind, and it really needs to really become that people strategy. So what I would say is, first, as we start, the biggest piece of this is helping people get to know themselves. And really through self-awareness, one of the greatest tools that we have, right, for at least most of you on the line, is a predictive index tool. And it's a behavioral assessment, measures someone's behavioral drives and needs. Also measures that of the role as well. So the behavioral drives and needs of the role, which we'll talk about. One of the biggest things that you can help people understand is that of themselves. We all don't fit in this nice box. We're all different in different ways. So self-awareness, just a clear, honest interrogation of natural talents, passions, and behaviors. And authenticity, a conviction to remain true to self, not in a reactive way, but how do I do that in a very responsible way? And getting people on board with that. And having this dialogue, and one of the things that I always say that most of you on the line have heard me say is, we're perfect the way we are. And I believe that. And a lot of times the issue around not feeling perfect is the fact that we're not in the right roles. We're not doing what really drives us or motivates us. We don't have the right manager. We're not being managed correctly. So when you think about these two things, self-awareness and authenticity, all top performers across um, any job, any sector, all have these two things: self-awareness and an authentic way to bring those talents to the table. When you can draw this out in yourself and then with others, especially if you're a manager, because I know some of you that are on the line, I can see some of your names there, um, that are managers. When you can draw this out in people, really you really get rid of all those weaknesses and they become irrelevant inside of your systems. Single greatest differentiator of genius performance: turning right more than you turn left. And that's really all when we say, how do we make our weaknesses irrelevant, is turning towards our strengths more than we do our weaknesses. Sometimes that's easier said than done, but I'm going to give you some things that I believe you can use right away, right out of the gate, as soon as we're done with this. And I'm open to questions at the end as well. So take a look at the role, identify the need, what needs to happen. How can I turn right more than left? It's not about that old paradigm of, hey, I continue to have to fix myself. There is a need for continuous self-development, self-awareness, and being more authentic to oneself. However, that constant mindset of, I think what most of us were brought up in and conditioned about, really trying to fix myself, is really trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Fix the role, get the right person in the right seat, and then manage them correctly and get them on the right team. So as we look at that, if you want to take these notes down, we talk about this a lot. The 4 forces of disengagement or work environment pressures, they could be good as well. Right? It could be good stressors or bad stressors. First is job fit. I mean, many of us, if we go back in our careers, have had those positions where it just didn't fit. And it doesn't matter how good that manager was. I often joke that I'm not going to be anybody's CFO. We'll have a fun time for a few months, but I miss a couple of decimal points here, a couple of zeros there, and the next thing you know, the company's going under.
I'm not sure I understand.
That was not me. That was my Siri, so I apologize for that. Second is manager impact. We're going to talk a lot about that and how you can bring that into your work environment. Okay, so you as a manager, what you're doing, how you can impact that person, how you can help them make their weaknesses irrelevant, but by doing so, bringing people that are complementary to you onto your team that also make you as a manager, make those weaknesses irrelevant for you, that strengthens you and what you bring to the table, but it will also strengthen your team. And then we'll talk about culture and its impact and the team dynamics as well. So the pressures, again: job fit, manager impact, team dynamics, and culture. Can be good or it can be bad. So let's take a look at the first piece here, is really job fit. You'll see, and this is coming for some of you that may not be familiar with one of the tools that we use, a predictive index. What you're seeing on your screen in those orange boxes is the behavior that we've come up with for the role. And those A, B, C, and D's that you see before you here is the person. So you have the person compared to the role. Now, this is a pretty good fit. There are some things that we obviously coach with, but this is what we want. More often than not, we want a good, solid fit for that role. We want that person to come to work every day and not have to behave much different than what comes natural to them. Because this is what we're looking for. And then once they're in that role, this is the coaching guide within the predictive index software that you can utilize. Now you have an objective way to give feedback to that person. So this role is actually what we're looking for. Pretty good fit, but we're looking for a little bit more task orientation, a little bit more independence. So that's the objective feedback we can give the person. What I like about this is this takes the subjectivity out of it. A lot of times, as we give people feedback, uh, we're just left to our own biases, and that becomes subjective. This is a way, a platform to make this objective in a way that, hey, look, I'm giving you feedback on data, and this is the way you need to be. Here's the course correction that we need to have so that you can really excel in your role. Second piece, we talked about, job fit. The biggest piece that see a lot of companies struggle with is this whole idea of managing the person versus managing the job. Great managers lead. For those of you, if you want to reference it, for those of you that have gone through the predictive index training, this would be the new toolkit. If you want to look at the new toolkit on page 6, summary of motivating needs, going back to platinum rule, treat people the way they need to be treated for maximum productivity and efficiency. So you have the person, you have their PI, and then you have their role. So when, with the example that we just utilized, that's a pretty good fit. I don't have to do a lot of work coaching, manage performance management, because we've got what we need. It's up to the manager then to give that person absolutely everything that they need. So the manager might have to bend a little bit. For example, yesterday I was doing a tune-up with a group down in Tennessee. I have a phenomenal sales manager at the company that I was working with, and he is a high D. So he's very precise, wants perfection, has a tendency to micromanage. He manages a bunch of people that are more low D on the predictive index scale, which means they don't need a lot of information and they don't like that micromanagement. So what we discussed was how he can tailor his approach to get what he needs out of his salespeople, to get even more out of him. And it's really, and he has a lot of great self-awareness. So we were throwing back some ideas to just strengthen that relationship between he and his team. And some of the examples that I gave him to really utilize in his work with his team, and you can do this as a manager. And again, this is in the predictive index software. This is something we call the personal development chart. And what you see is, before you see A, B, C, and D, and you see that person's profile plotted out on the A, B, C, and D. So what we have there is the dominance. So that person's a high A, a high B, a low C, a low D. For this role, they're a pretty good fit. That's what we just talked about. But now we're getting into performance management and some coaching. What you want to discuss with that is, how do I make the weaknesses irrelevant? So that's looking at this side. Really look, here are the strengths, here are the cautions. Okay. So being able to provide that person with objective feedback and really going through each one of these self-coaching tips, how do you draw that out in a person? This is a great way to have discussion with a person. I'm going to give you some questions. So if you're taking down some notes, I've got some questions that are coming up that you might want to utilize in this time with people to really draw that out of them and say, look, I don't want you to focus so much on what you're not good at, but what are you really strong at? And are there ways to develop that where we don't dip into these cautions, where these strengths become weaknesses of yours? So it might be like for example, for this high A, just because you have it doesn't mean you use it all the time. Do you need to just kind of back off of being aggressive? And how are some ways that we can do that? Do you need to be a little bit more collaborative? What does the role call for? And how can I give you that feedback? How can we practice that in a way where you're really strengthening that person? So next is the strategy guide. Again, this is in your predictive index platform if you're a predictive index client. If you're not, we'd be happy to run through this with you. So just a couple tips with this. So what we suggest is printing this out. Now, how we get these questions here, you'll see these boxes and these rows. These are from the three most significant factor emphasis combinations, which is the ABBA combination, the ACCA combination, and of course the strongest one is the ADDA combination of that person's predictive index results. And what we would suggest that you do is we actually would suggest that you do this every 90 days. And the first time, yes, it's going to take a little bit of extra time. But after that, every 90 days, it should take about probably 30 to 45 minutes to have this discussion. But you want that person, so in this case, Bernie, so let's take Bernie and I'll be Bernie's manager. I would give this to Bernie and say, Bernie, I want you to give me really a report card on how you think I'm doing in these areas. And then I'm going to self-evaluate, and then Bernie and I are going to come together and compare notes. Most of the time, the manager will score themselves a little bit more difficult than will the employee, but you're going to compare what did we have correct? You know, when I mean by correct, what did we have the same? So give them challenges and solicit input. Might be one that we both checked, or maybe Bernie checked it and I didn't. So then I'm going back to Bernie and I say, hey, okay, Bernie, give me some insight onto how you think I do this for you. Because I want to make sure, especially if I have other people that are wired like Bernie that I'm managing, that I can really replicate that inside of my team. Then we jump to the second page of that management strategy guide. What have we done well? And this just becomes an ongoing every quarter. And I would really, as if you're a manager, at the end of the first time you do this, I would just put it in your calendar, a tickler, you know, so it comes up in the next 90 days. What have we done well? What can we do better? And one of the reasons that I really like this is because it puts some onus on the manager as well, but it also incorporates trust in the environment. So like, what can we do better? It shows to that employee that, hey, look, I'm here right beside you. It's that manager input that we talked about from before. So getting a really good manager and that person's into feedback, so that develop the action plan. Again, you'll actually see it there in the plan. It's actually saying, hey, the next 90 days, what do we need to do? These are action steps that you want to put in front of you, right? And the reason that we recommend 90 days, and you'll see a lot of other people recommend 90 days, is because typically after 90 days, we forget. So the employee forgets, we forget as the manager, we both forget. We put it in there so we don't have surprises at the end of the year. A lot of companies will look to do yearly performance evaluations, and then, you know, we forget all that we've done, the good, the bad, whatever it is. And usually we're just remembering the past few days. So the past 2 or 3 months. And what we really want to do is have a culmination. If you do a yearly performance, that we have, when we sit down and do this, we have already completed 3 of these, and we're looking at the whole year more objectively. Hey, what did we do? What's going on? How can we better this? Okay. But I really like this. We do have a lot of I know some of you even on the line are really utilizing this very well. This is something we utilize internally. Just gives us a way to stay on track as well. While you're doing this, so you might want to write these down. Again, this is going to be recorded if you want to go back and look at these. But here are some questions that I would suggest, especially as you onboard people, but more so utilizing the strategy guide and this 90-day review with your folks. to really make weaknesses irrelevant. What I mean by combinations is those 3-factor emphasis combinations. So whatever that person's AB, AC, and AD combination are, help them really paint a picture of how does this influence my workplace style, right? So if I'm really like myself, if I'm high A, low D, I want to make sure that I'm spending most of my time in my strengths, which is working more on strategic initiatives. Me with being a low as a D, are there things that I can create that are a little bit outside the box? Myself being a highest B, are there things where I have that team dynamic going on that I have time to do that, where I'm not sitting in a room all by myself trying to think all day. I mean, those are good times, but it shouldn't be happening all the time. That's one that would be really relying on a weakness. So work on that question. So how do these combinations influence my workplace style? So factor emphasis combinations. Really, really like this question, and you can use this in conjunction with that 90-day plan. So what strengths do I have that I would like to utilize more fully and cultivate? This is a great question for those of you that are managing millennials that are just coming into the workforce, especially. Having that self-awareness with the PI, but taking it a step further and saying, hey, look, you have these certain strengths. How can I help you more fully embrace those and really cultivate those inside of your role, inside of our relationship, manager-employee relationship? But also ask yourself that as a manager. I run across a lot of managers that, you can see they obviously have some strengths. And even though those of you that are on the line, that's I'm pausing right here and saying, I know some of you have a lot of strengths that you could really bring out in yourself that would really help your teams. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the line. I mean that because I've seen you in action. What are some of those strengths that you really bring to the table that maybe you've set aside because you've said, hey, look, I think I need to behave this way because you've seen a different management style in somebody else. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Fully embrace what you have in yourself. A lot of times we just have biases of how we think we should behave. People, when they're really embracing their strengths, right, bring a lot to the table. The next question that you can utilize is, what strengths do I have that I might be over utilizing? All right, because this could inhibit other people from using theirs. But the other thing as a manager that you might be doing is you might be inhibiting the growth of the people that you might be able to delegate to, which frees up more time for you to work on things that you're really good at. And then a couple of the last questions: what are my greatest development opportunities? You can use challenges there as well, but really helping people focus on, what do I need to do to really make my weaknesses irrelevant? Focus on my strengths. What is it? Am I in the right role? What are the areas that have been limiting me professionally? A lot of times that will be a weakness that that person thinks they need to hammer in all the time, and we get them more focused on their strengths and looking at how I can be complementary in my team, which we'll look at next. So that's what we're doing now. Now we've jumped to more of the culture, more of what's going on the team. And again, the screenshot in front of you is a team analytic report from the predictive index software. So what we have here is a team of people, and the average of the purple is the average of the team. So now you can see, how do I fit in? If I would put my PI across here, this would tell me that most of my team is more of the higher D. We have a good overall. We're not deficient in any of these things. So I'm asking myself, is this the right team to have? How is this team going to interact with one another? This team's going to have a tendency to be a little bit more proactive. And I get that through that high A, low C combination. They're not going to be probably as social maybe as I. They're going to be come to the table with more of an analytic task orientation viewpoint. I have some low B's in there, right, that we might need to rely on. They're going to need to think. So, giving them an agenda beforehand, always good. But who can I rely on my team to do things? This is a really good team. And again, this is just hypothetical. It doesn't mean this is what we need. We might not need that. We might need to make some changes here on the team, or we might say this is what we have. How can we bring that out in the team and utilize that more? If you really want to get down into the, slicing and dicing things, these are the factor emphasis combinations of the combined team that we can utilize. What does the team bring to the table? Again, very, very proactive. But the other thing that I see here, D over C. So very, very careful with the rules. Is that what we need? But really looking at how can we utilize the strength of that team when everybody's weighted that way, instead of, looking down here and saying, hey, look, these are some things that we're weak at. Do we need more of that? Do we need less of that? Or do we rely on the strengths of the team? And how can we rely on the strengths of the team with that? And if you really want to get into it, and I know some of you have called in and asked about this, and we've done some tune-ups with the teamwork styles. I absolutely love this, and there's more coming out with this. All these dots here are team members. And what this tells you is the overall team. And for those of you that haven't utilized this, go into your system, mess around with it, put your team members in there. This tells us how we're coming together as a team. It also tells us where our blind spot could be. This particular one, this is a great example, because this is a team this is actually an executive team that is really trying to push in their organization more teamwork and employee experience. The irony about that is the leadership team doesn't have that in their makeup. So when they say it, they have to really provide the stories around that and provide the way to get that done. And what they're looking at right now is, okay, this is where we're strong at in our executive team. We're really strong in innovation, agility, results, and discipline. Who do we need to bring in, 2 or 3 more people to make this more relevant? If we say we're going to do this, how are we going to make that happen? So we either have to bend and adapt, which all of us are going to have to do, or we bring in people to make our weaknesses irrelevant. And so that's going to be more people that are on the team that are a little bit more C over A, more B over D, as you can see it in this diagram. All right, so that doesn't put as much strain on all these people trying to be something that they're not. And if you really want to get into it, and I would suggest calling, and this is just the example that I gave, you can incorporate your strategy insights. So remember when we started off today, we talked about your people strategy. So what do we need? And I would really suggest, as we come to the end of October here, you're really looking at your strategy for 2020, that you sit down with us and you go over this. You go over, hey, what do we need for this new year? What teams do we have? You can do this departmentally. You can do this in your teams, your smaller teams, your larger teams. But what you start out with is the strategy insights, picking what you want, and then go in and put your people in. So you say for this new year, hey, look, we want increasing team cohesion. We want to foster teamwork, develop employees, empowering our employees, and increase employee loyalty. And then you plot the people and go, ooh, there's a huge gap there. That becomes part of your people strategy for either the next quarter, or in this case, if we're looking into 2020, how do we accomplish that? Do we need to bring more people in? Do we need to bring people in that's their strength, which would be my suggestion. And the nice thing about the PI is you can go into the software and say, who do we have in there that can bring some insight and really get this done for us, so we can, this part of the team can really concentrate on what they're really good at. But if this is the gap, we just identified it objectively instead of saying subjectively, hey, we need this, hey, we need that. Because what this team would have kind of a tendency to do is we give this lip service, the teamwork and the employee experience, and really we're focused on this just unconsciously. We need to be more conscious of the teamwork and the employee experience. The only way to do that is to bring people in that have that strength about them. Okay, wrapping it up. I do have a couple other things that I threw in here last minute that I wanted you to think about, and hopefully this is helpful. I know I've gone over a couple minutes here, but we'll still have some time for some questions. One of the things that I would encourage you to do, some of you use our values index as well, to incorporate it with the predictive index. Here's a good way when we're talking about making our weaknesses irrelevant to utilize the values index to incorporate it with the predictive index. Run towards your passions and run away towards those things that don't motivate you. So you have your PI, the values index, remember, it measures a level deeper than the PI. It measures what I'm passionate about. How can I take those passions and drives and incorporate those into my behavior? So if you're not familiar with the values index, we did a webinar, I think last month, on that, of what drives people and incorporating that inside of the PI. So taking your top two motivators. So somebody could have a motivator that's very altruistic and very individualistic. And how does that fit into somebody that's a high A, high B, low C, low D? Taking those top two motivators and sitting down with a person. Do these passions or appetites get fed at work? So somebody that might be highly altruistic and a high B, is there time to serve others inside of my environment, to do things with other people? Is it getting fed inside your personal life? Are we trying to motivate you? Look at your lowest motivators. Are we trying to motivate you on something that really doesn't motivate you at all? Like a lot of times we'll try to motivate people economically, but that might not be their highest motivator. It might be one of their lowest. It could be their absolute lowest. I've seen that a lot where people are very highly altruistically motivated, or they have a passion to serve others, and they constantly are getting raises, and their management is trying to motivate them to keep them. And then you look at something like their values and their economic is their absolute lowest, and you're saying, okay, well, we need to motivate them in a different way. So incorporating this into that management strategy guide, into that 90-day review with your people, and really saying, does this help or hinder you? What are you really passionate about? And bringing that out in others, because that's going to really focus on their strengths. All right, time for questions. I don't know if anybody has questions. So I'll shut up for a second or two and open it up for questions. Wow, quiet bunch today. Hopefully this was helpful. What I would ask for you as a favor is, if it was helpful, shoot us an email, tell us how it was helpful and how we can expand on it. We're more than willing to continue to get these better for you. I hope this helps really strengthen some ideas that you all have. I know we talked about kind of the same things yesterday in a tune-up that I was doing. It was very helpful for their team. To reinforce some some of what we're talking about. Some of the upcoming events that we have are listed in front of you. It's still not too late if you want to get into a managing people to perform or a PI Jedi class. We're having one next week in Cleveland, Ohio. You can see one of our consultants, Zach Del Turco, on October 30th. He's going to be doing a webinar just like this on talent optimization. I think he's going to bring a perspective from the millennial side of things, just because he's one of those, and he's doing a great job here. But you want to stay tuned in for that. November 12th and 13th, becoming a PI practitioner. So that's the PI Jedi training. If you're around November 12th as well and not going into training, we'd love to see you at our next breakfast briefing, Thankful for Talent. So we're going to be talking about talent there. And then November 14th, we have another webinar, Shining Through Strength. So this will be an extension of what we're talking about today and really bringing those strengths out in people. So with that, if nobody has any further questions, we'll get this recording out to everybody. Please share it with your teams if they haven't got the time to tune in today. You can share it. It's always there for you to go back to. But if you have any questions, please reach out, give us a shout out, call, email. Be happy to come by. This is a great time. We're in the last quarter, great time to get in and do one more tune-up for everybody. So with that, happy PIing and really focus on your strengths, and we'll see you around. Take care.